For joining us today for establishing a lasting culture of improvement within IT. I am Lindsay with Beyond 20, and I'm here with Andy Rivers and Amanda. And we are going to, well, I'm going to introduce our lovely speakers, and then they're going to dig into how to work CSI into your everyday kind of pants on fire urgency stuff while you're at the office. So first of all, we've got Andy. Well, wait, we got Amanda first. We've got Amanda, who is a senior ITSM advisor here with us at Beyond 20. She's an ITIL expert and a certified Scrum Master. Amanda has been working in IT service management as a consultant or instructor for a really long time. She's been working in the public and private sectors both, and she just had a tiny baby, and he is adorable. And next up, we've got Andy Rivers, who I'm sure you know. He is a senior advisor here with us at Beyond 20. He's an ITIL expert, a certified Scrum Master, and he's also our resident cybersecurity guru here. He is CISSP certified. He teaches all of our security classes here. He's former ACIO of University of Tennessee System, and he runs reluctantly. So with that, I will kick it over to Andy, and he's going to tell you a little bit about us at Beyond 20. And then get into the bulk of the presentation. If you have any questions throughout, go ahead and put them in the question panel. I'll be monitoring that as we go, and we'll get them answered in the last maybe 10 minutes or so of the presentation. So thanks, Andy.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Lindsay. Yeah, looking at the attendees, look like we have some old faces and some new faces, so that's always good. For those of you that are new and may not know Beyond 20 very well, I'll just kind of give you a brief introduction to us as a company. We are what I describe as a 360-degree IT service management company. And what I mean by 360-degree is in the fact that we do training, consulting, as well as tool implementation. So we help you run the full gambit from defining your strategy, doing a maturity assessment, to providing ITIL training, Scrum training, CSSP training, any of your training needs you have, all the way down to if you need help implementing a tool, we are a Sharewell partner. So we can help you go all the way from strategy all the way to implementing it to a tool and helping things get better over time. And that's a lot of what we're going to focus on today is with the continual service improvement is how do we keep making those improvements over time? Just kind of go along with this too. Beyond 20, our company name kind of embodies this as well. Gartner came out with a study a few years ago that said that 80% of major failures were due to people and process. So only 20% were due to hardware, a switch dying, a router dying, those types of things. But the other 80% was around failures in people and process. And so that's directly in the areas that we can help you with. And so we kind of help you go beyond that 20%. Today, we're going to talk about CSI, Continual Service Improvement. So we're going to talk a little bit about what CSI is. We're going to give you some tools to help you get started. We'll talk about the CSI register and how important it is that you have one, also how to create one, and some of the elements that should be in your CSI register. And then any questions that you have along the way, we'll address those. As Lindsay mentioned, feel free as you have questions as we go through, just enter those over in the chat and we'll address those as we go and at the end. So to start out, let's talk about what CSI is. So this is Continual Service Improvement. If you were coming here to watch CSI Miami or any of the other nice shows, you will be vastly disappointed. So no, what we are talking about here is doing continual service improvement. And one of the things to recognize is that the continual service improvement, CSI, is rooted around gradual improvement over time. What we are trying to do is create a culture that we gradually get better and improve over time. What we don't want to do is sort of treat CSI as, hey, June's going to be our CSI month. We're going to do this one big initiative. We're all going to be better. We're going to improve. And then we'll be done with CSI until next June. That's really not what we want to do with CSI. We want to create this over time. If we kind of just do that spur of like, hey, let's do CSI this month, it's sort of the equivalent of like in January, I went out and buy this nice new shiny treadmill. Like I'm going to run, I'm going to do all this stuff. This is what I'm going to be doing. And then February rolls around and I'm storing all my folded clothes on it. It's not exactly the improvement that I had wanted to lead to. So This may or may not be a real picture
You've
of
seen
one
my
of our
house?
house. We took that before the webinar started. So. But that we want to make sure, just like buying the treadmill, the gym membership, those things, you get that improvement by going every day, not by just going once, not just going twice, but you have to build that culture or that sort of lifestyle to be able to do that. And we'll use the gym membership analogy several times as we go through this. Don't feel like you got to be a gym buff or anything like that to understand this, but it's sort of a good universal reference that we'll use as we go. So one of the things we wanted to do was not just talk about the theory today, but actually talk about the theory and also give you some tools that you can directly apply for these and getting started with CSI. Because sometimes it's a little daunting to think, okay, I want to get better, but how do I actually get there? How do I start? Where do I start? And so that's what we're going to kind of go through. One of the main things that you can do is start with the CSI model. And so the CSI model is a great little framework or little model for doing any improvement that you want to do. And so we're going to kind of step through each one of these steps here. So, we start off with what is the vision? And our vision should map to the business vision, mission, and goals. So whatever we're doing in IT should map back to the business. So we shouldn't really just be doing things in IT for the sake of doing them for IT. It should have alignment with what the business is wanting to accomplish and what we are doing for the business. Next, we want to sort of look at where are we now? What's that baseline assessment? Because if we think we want to get better and we know we want to get better, we got to know where we're starting from. So we got to have some sort of baseline assessment so we have a known starting point. And then we want to think about where do we want to be? And where do we want to be? We want to have some measurable targets, some things that we're actually striving toward that we can measure and that we can achieve. Then we want to think about how do we get there? That's the actual service and process improvements that we're going to undertake to try and get there and do the improvements that we want to take. Then did we get there? That's the measurements and metrics saying, hey, we created these targets. We did these improvements. Did we actually get there? Did we hit those targets that we wanted to hit? And then lastly, we want to keep the momentum going. Just like we don't want to buy the treadmill and then start folding clothes on it. We want to make sure we keep this momentum going over and over and over again. And I guess, in the introduction, Lindsay mentioned that I was somewhat of a reluctant runner. So I'll use a running analogy to kind of use the model here. So, what is the vision? My wife has gotten into running, so that's sort of why I'm into running now. So it's the reluctant part of that. But, she's talked me into running a half marathon. So what is the vision? I want to run a half marathon. Where are we now? Well, where are we now? I'm sitting on the couch eating Cheetos. So it's not a fantastic starting point, but at least now I know. So there's my starting point. So where do I want to be? I need to come up with some measurable targets. So, one measurable target would be like, okay, within 6 weeks, I want to run a 5K. Within, the next 8 weeks, I'm going to be able to run a 10K. Then within the next 3 months, I want to be able to run that half marathon. I have some measurable targets there. And then how do we get there? I'm going to download the little Nike Plus training app, and it's going to tell me to, run for 1 minute, walk for 2, run for 1, walk for 2. It's going to give me this training plan that I'm going to do to get to this actual improvement I want to have. And then did we get there? Did I get there? Do I have the t-shirt from the 5K? Do I have the medal from the 10K? Do I have the medal from the half marathon? I'll be able to say, did I actually achieve these things? And then in this case, how do I keep the momentum going? Well, the best way to keep this momentum going is to sign up for another race. So I always have one on the calendar that's kind of forcing me to keep training along the way. So I really like this model because it can kind of apply to anything, apply to any improvement that you want to make. This is a good, solid model to work from. So let's start walking through these. So what is the vision? So this is a great little diagram that shows, it actually comes directly from the service strategy publication. So this is rooted within ITIL best practice. And so this diagram here comes directly from their publications. And I like it because it shows, hey, the business has some strategy, its vision, its mission, objectives that it wants to accomplish. The organizations within that business all need to have their own strategy that says, how do we match to the business outcome? So IT needs a strategy. If you're manufacturing, you need a strategy. You need to all have your strategy that is in alignment with the business strategy. So we are supporting the business in what they are trying to achieve. This is a hugely critical step because this gives us where we're going. It sort of helps establish that destination that we're striving toward. Without that, I sort of feel like we're in the Forrest Gump model where we're just running and running and running. Like, where are we going? I don't know, but we're just running. And so we want to have that idea of where are we actually going? What are we trying to go to? What is that vision? So the tool for this, so at this step, one of the things you want to do for this is do a strategic planning session. And so, this is one of those I highly recommend that your executive leadership, they take some time off site. They don't need to do this once a week or once a month, but, especially at the beginning of the year, maybe you might even do it twice a year. Have your executive leadership go off site and say, okay, what is the current business, vision? Now, how are we going to support the business in that vision and define the vision for IT for that, then establish the goals under it, and then have all that trickle back down to the staff. So a couple of things that you want to do with a strategic planning is, first, do it. So don't just kind of put it on a back burner. A is actually do it, conduct it, have your executive leadership do it. The next thing you want to do is make sure that it wasn't a secret strategic planning session, and that all the output from that as you establish the vision, mission, and goals for IT and how they align with the business, make sure that that is conveyed and communicated back with the organization. And as we talk through this, this can apply within the model because it's going to be, kind of funneled in with the next steps as we go through. But one of the things that happens sometimes is either A, companies don't do it, or B, they do it and it only stays at that executive leadership level. And so you get a little bit of value out of that, but not a whole lot. So the next step is, where are we now? And so this is a critical one because we got to think about what's our starting point. So back to the, I kind of use the analogy of me having to start training and start running. The starting plan for me going from the couch to a 5K is totally different than if I had already run one half marathon. If I was already in that condition, my whole training plan, all the things under it would be completely different. And so that's why it's really important that this is actually step 2. So step 1 is, where are we going? What's our vision? Step 2 is, where are we now? What is our starting point? Because then that's going to sort of drive and dictate all the rest of the things that we're going to try and accomplish. So one of the tools that you can use in this is a maturity assessment. Where are we actually at with our processes? So as we look at trying to do improvements, we look at our organization now, what is that, as we often call it, our as is? What is our current as is? How's our organization? Are we doing things really well? Are we not? For those of you that may not be familiar with the maturity scale, you can kind of think of as, 1 is just chaos. Just things are just happening. You don't really know how they're happening. 2 is there's some structure, but it's still really ad hoc. So 2 is you may be getting some things done, but it relies too much on individuals. It relies too much on just institutional knowledge. 3 is really the sweet spot where you want to be. So 3 is where it's actually managed. So that's where if you're making changes in your process, you can see that's consistent, it's documented, someone owns the process, they're trained on it. So as you make improvements, you know the outcome from those improvements. If you're below a 3, as you try and make improvements, you can't always know for sure that, hey, what we just did that actually make it better, or was it something else? Because you're not really managing it day in and day out. Level 4 is really around optimization. Level 5, 2 is around that. Most organizations won't and don't need to spend the level and time of investment of resources to get to a level 5 in all their processes because there's just not, for the resources spent, there's not enough value on it. So really, most organizations, you want to get to at least a 3 in all your processes so that they're managed and that they're repeatable, consistent, all those wonderful things we want around a process really start around level 3.
Yeah, and just to add to that, this is also something that you don't need to do on a weekly or monthly basis. The measurement for the maturity should be done at the beginning and then maybe annually as a health check. It's kind of like when you're trying to lose weight, they say don't look at the scale every day. Same kind of thing with this. You don't want to measure this one too much.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Yeah, you don't want to like reassess every week or anything like that. You'll be scrambling too much. So yeah, typically what we see, the way places find this is they either do an assessment themselves or they bring someone in like us to do an assessment. Most assessments, and I recommend all the ones we do, and I would recommend that you do as well, get one that includes a roadmap. And so that's going to come up in one of the steps here a little bit later. But not only does it tell you your as is, but it kind of gives you some steps to strive toward. And that's, again, like you said, that annual health check or something, but it's good to not reassess until you actually take some of the actions and you have time to get them in place, have them part of your culture before you reassess what your current level is. So as we go through, let's talk about, where do we want to be? And so this is describing, where is that, how do we get to strive to that vision? So we establish the vision, we establish where we want to go, we establish that, here's our current starting point. Now, where do we want to be? Now, that where we want to be doesn't need to be just some pie in the sky that, hey, we want to be awesomer.
We want to get better.
Yeah, we want to be better. That's not what we're saying here. If that's on your plan, you got to go back and revisit it. So what we want to do here is actually establish some of those measurable targets. What do we actually want to be? To tie that back to the maturity assessment, we want to be a level 3. That's a measurable target that we can say, hey, we're at a 2.6 right now. We want to be at a 3 or better within the next year. That's a measurable target that you can have. Back to the running analogy, measurable target was running the 5K, the 10K, the half, that you actually have some measurable targets around that.
For some of us, running a mile.
Yeah. Well, start somewhere. Like I said, I'm on the couch eating Cheetos right now, so mine's probably more realistic to start with the mile, the downhill mile. When we talk about measuring things, it's good to kind of talk through this a little bit too. So when we're trying to decide what to measure, there's really 4 reasons why we measure something. To justify, so that's sort of looking for some sort of factual evidence. To validate, that's kind of going against our strategic vision. Did we make a good decision? To intervene, do we need to make changes? We need to have corrective action, or to direct. So do we need some more, resources in this area or that area? And that's really around sort of getting targets and metrics. So as you define those measurable targets, think about these 4 things and what you're trying to measure and why you're measuring them. So our next step is, how do we get there? So we've said, hey, we painted this nice picture. We know this is our vision. It maps to the business. We got our starting point. We now have some targets. Now, how do we get there? We have all these great ideas, but how do we actually get them there? And so this is where you want to develop your improvement plan. And so your improvement plan needs to have some sort of time scale associated with it. So what are the things we're going to do immediately? What are the things we're going to do, between now and 6 months or 1 year? Depending on your organization and your culture, you may have to adjust those time scales. Some of the companies we work with are very rapid. And so they'll have 0 to 3 months and then 6 months and beyond. So they're doing a lot of rapid change, a lot of new deployments, a lot of new services. They're kind of cutting edge on things they're trying to get out. So their time scale is going to be a lot shorter. We work with other organizations, especially maybe more on the federal side, the state side, where their time scales are longer just for the way things work and the resources they have. And so theirs might be tomorrow, and it might be 6 to 12 months, and then there might be year 2, year 3 over on the time scale. But the idea is that you want to have some time scale associated with your improvement plan. You don't want to just say, here's the 50 things we're going to do better. Let's put them in some priority order. And we're going to talk about how to prioritize things here in a little bit, but you want to have them some time scale associated with it. So next we want to talk about, did we get there? So we want to make sure that we don't just do the, the Forrest Gump where we're running and running. So we want to know, where are we running to? And then we also want to know, did we actually get there? So this is where we're going to talk about coming back and saying, did we hit those targets? We need to have some measurements and metrics along the way to say, are we actually hitting these things? Are we doing them? And so this is a repeat slide, but this is back to where you really need to think about the things that you're measuring. Which one of these 4 questions am I trying to answer? And then what am I going to track to help me answer that question? If it doesn't map back and you're not sure, you probably don't need to be tracking it. So one of the things within IT, especially when we think about improvement projects, a lot of times we don't suffer from things to track. We suffer from too many things. We have too much noise, too much data. So you really want to focus on, okay, what are we going to track that tells us, are we getting close? Are we hitting this target? Did we actually get there? And so, one of the things, think through those metrics, apply the SMART, specific, measurable, attainable, all that good stuff. Make sure that you do that as you go through them, but also make sure they're helping you answer one of these 4 things. So lastly, and maybe most important, is how do we keep the momentum going? So, we've got sort of the picture here for playing pool. So if you've ever played pool, you break and everything shatters around, and then they all eventually stop, and then you start playing the game again. So how do we keep the momentum going? How do we keep things chugging along, so we don't just do that, hey, June is a CSI month, we did 1 or 2 of these things, or what I even describe as initiative fatigue. We start doing something, we're like, yay, we're going to do this, everybody gets excited, yay, and then all of a sudden it sort of just drops off and you don't hear about it anymore. So then the next thing comes, oh, yay, we're going to do this, and it just sort of drops off again. After a few times of that, nobody goes, yay, anymore. It's like, oh, okay, well, this isn't going to happen. Nothing's going to happen here. I'll just kind of ignore it. And that happens, that's sort of the initiative fatigue. And that's also what sort of undermines your culture of continuous service improvement, because you never really see anything to fruition. So again, this is a good way to apply this model so that you're kind of coming through, you're making sure you hit it, and also you're making sure you keep the momentum going. One of the best ways you can keep the momentum going is actually the creation of the CSI register. So the CSI register is a listing of all the improvements that you want to do. And so having the listing of all the improvements that you want to do together in one spot. So A, it helps you be more efficient, so you don't just have all these sort of, hey, we want to do this, we want to do that. Have them all together so that you have one list so that leadership can look at it, evaluate it, prioritize it, fund it, resource it, all together, and so that you can actually make progress. It also helps you with that initiative fatigue, because you can see, hey, we got 50 things on here. Oh, we want to start doing this. Well, did we finish number 1? No. Well, then let's not start number 14 until we finish number 1. Let's see it all the way through to completion.
One other thing that I've done in the past when working with a lot of different teams and trying to get continual service improvement spread across the entire IT department. So I put our CSI register on the bottom of every single team meeting's agenda. That way, everyone who was involved could see all of the initiatives that we were currently working on. And it was a great way to get people active in the process, because during our meetings, if they had an idea, they could bring it to the table and then they would eventually see it on the register.
Oh, that's good. So that really helps with buy-in, them seeing it.
Yeah, and it also helps with them seeing the fruits of their efforts, and when things are getting better and their life is getting easier at work, it makes them it makes it easier for them to stay maybe 15 minutes later to help work on an improvement project.
Right. Yeah, because success breeds success.
Exactly.
And so, yeah, if you can see the fruits of your labor, you're more than likely to keep working on it to make it better. So did it also help? I know one of the things that helped with us, and it sounds like it may help with yours too, was actually having that ownership. So like maybe you have a CSI item that's like, hey, make the CAB meeting more efficient or something, and it had somebody actually own it. So if somebody had ideas, they could go talk to whoever owned it.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely.
Yeah, so when we talk about, and we'll do an example here in a minute, but your CSI register is owned by your CSI manager, but each item on the list, they may have, parsed out to somebody else to actually accomplish it.
Yeah, and giving credit where credit is due also helps with that, because when somebody accomplishes something, whether it's just automating a simple task or taking a few things off someone else's plate, having it visible to the entire team is a great way to motivate your staff.
Yeah, that's good too. Yeah, and not only do they're seeing the fruits of it, but you directly get credit for it. So yeah, I like that. I like the list having it down at the bottom. So as we went through, just to kind of recap some of the tools we mentioned. So the first one is, adopt the CSI model. Adopt that model as how you're going to do continual service improvement, that you're going to kind of go through those 6 steps every time we go through it to be able to have some structure, some framework for managing our continual service improvement. Next is we start with that, that very first one. What is a vision? Have some strategic planning, do a strategic planning session. Don't just assume that's going to happen. Also, don't assume that you're just doing it right now because you've been doing IT for years. It's very easy for IT to fall in the trap of doing IT for the sake of doing IT and not really having that direct alignment with the business. So the strategic planning is a big piece in that. The next one is the maturity assessment. Where are we now? Establish that baseline with your processes, the things that you're trying to improve. Are we at a 1? Are we at a 2? Are we above a 3? Again, depending on where your starting point is, it's going to change, the next things on the list. It's going to change your implementation plan. It's going to change your targets. So kind of have that good known starting point. Next, improvement plan there. So have, the things you want to do, have those mapped out. Go ahead and map them out with some sort of time scale associated with them. You know, are we doing this first, second, third? And even within that, is this the next 3 months, 6 months, a year? That also, I think that helps with, you know, Amanda, as you were describing, if I see something on the list, it's also good to know, okay, this showed up on the list, was this going to be done in 6 months, a year, is it going to be done next week? So having some sort of time scale associated with it. And then the actual creation of the CSI register. So having that list out there. And now we're about to dig deeper into the CSI register. So the next section here is dealing directly with the CSI register.
And if you don't have the ability, if you're not in charge of strategic planning for your organization, there are other ways, and we'll get into that in a few slides. There are ways to do this on a smaller scale. If you're trying to start an improvement initiative on your own and get buy-in, we'll go over some tips on how to do that too.
Yeah, that's a great point. So yeah, you may not be in your you may not be in your organization where you can go up to the CIO and go, hey, you got to start doing strategic planning. Y'all need to go off site next month. You know, that just may not be something you can do. You can still do CSI. You can still start. What will happen is if you start and you start getting CSI under, you start doing the CSI register, you'll see that it starts driving the need for that strategic planning, and you'll see executive leadership sort of start recognizing that and seeing, oh, hey, we got to kind of paint a little bit better vision here. We got to do this. So it can come over time. Yeah, like you said, that's a good point. You don't need to throw your hands up and go, well, there's no way I can do step one. You can still get started.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the CSI register. So your CSI register getting started can be as simple as an Excel sheet. So you don't have to overcomplicate this, design some huge system just to get started. It can start out as an Excel sheet, and it can be as simple as, let's number it, what's the description, you know, some sort of scope to it. Is it small, medium, large, the priority, who owns it, and the current status. This is sort of your most basic CSI register, but it at least gets you started. You get started, you have a list, you know some scope, you know who owns it, you know the current status. When I was at the university, we saw great benefits in just simply creating a simple list like this, because I don't know if you've ever been in those meetings where you sort of have those deja vu moments where you're like, hey, we should do this. And then like a month later, you're in a meeting with the same people like, hey, we should do this. And you're like, wait, we've already had this discussion. And so we were able to pull out the CSI register and go, hey, look, yeah, we've already talked about this. It's item number 3. Jane, you own it. Status says we're still pending budget approval. Is that true? Yep. Okay. Well, let's stop circling the drain, having the same conversation, and move on to the next thing. And so it made us more efficient by just simply having the list. One of the other things you want to do is you put your list together, and as you start prioritizing things, you really want to work on distinguishing the things between the urgent versus important. And so where we want to be working is where those two things intersect. So we may have a lot of things that feel very urgent, but they're not necessarily important. And so we want to make sure we focus on the right things as we put our list together. We'll introduce here in a minute a way that you can prioritize things. Even that, I recommend that you use some tools for prioritization, but even still just keep a column for priority that leadership can set. And so they can help distinguish between the urgent and the important.
Yeah, and the service review meeting, this is meant to be a meeting between you and your customer. And you can also have an internal version with you and your teams. But this is a great place to start, especially like I said, if you are alone in your improvement initiative, to sit down with your boss, no matter what level they're on, and just talk to them about how you're doing. They will surprisingly open up over time if they don't right away, and it will help you build trust. And as they start to open up to you, you can start adding their ideas to your CSI register. And as you start to actually improve on them, they're going to see that, oh wow, we really are making improvements. We really are getting better. It's going to help to give you funding in the future if you need to, and it's going to really help your customers understand what you're doing as they see those gradual improvements over time.
Yeah, that's a great point, because you can start out with your own team, start where you're at, working with your manager. Create a CSI register. Ideally, you want a CSI register that covers all of IT. you may not be able to do that day one. It may not be within your scope of authority, your scope of anything. So start with your team. Create a CSI register for your team, the things you want to get better. And then over time, what you'll find is if you do it well, your leadership will buy into it because they're going to be able to say, hey, look at all the things we're getting done. Look at how we're getting better. Other teams will start to notice that, and then no teams work in a vacuum anymore. If you're doing service management, if you're providing services, if you think end-to-end service, they involve more than one team. There's just the way it is. And so as those things come up, your improvements are naturally going to involve some other teams. So you can start saying, hey, why don't we put your items on our register? Well, now that register is now grown to be your team and their team, and so you can kind of grow it over time. We also mentioned, you can start out in Excel. The ideal place for this to eventually be is in your IT service management tool. So, we do a lot with Sharewell. We've built out a map within Sharewell to do CSI. They have one as well. So what's nice is the eventual landing spot is to be within your IT service management tool, because then you can start relating incidents to it, changes, the other data that's in your service management tool can now be related to your register and the items on it. So, but again, don't treat that as a roadblock. Start out with a simple Excel list and grow over time.
Improving your improvement process.
Exactly. You can do CSI on CSI. So yes, it's like a mirror, looking in a mirror. I don't know, when does it stop? So one of the things I want to introduce to are concepts that I find hugely helpful with creating our CSI and prioritizing things is what's called work shortest job first. The principle is we want to pick the thing that gives us the highest value the quickest. So it may not always be the quickest and easiest, but it's the one that gives us the most value the quickest. Because you kind of think about it, is the value in the light bulb, was it when Edison thought of it? No, the value was when he created one that worked. And so what we're trying to do is get to the value the quickest that has the most. So there is math involved in this, so caution, math ahead. So there is some calculations. Thankfully, it can all be done in Excel. It's not math you have to do in your head, so you can build this out. We do have it built out in one of the versions of our CSI register. But here's the values we want to talk about with work shortest job first. So the first one is this user business value. What will the business get from this? Will it lead to more money? Will there be a delay if we don't? Will users prefer this over others? So if we get this feature, this functionality, will people buy from us instead of one of our competitors? So that's sort of one of the first values is what's the value back to the business? The next is time criticality. How quickly do we need to do this? Do we need to quickly get this out to get it in our environment within the next month? Can it take a little bit longer? Is it one that can actually last longer than the others? The next one is the risk reduction or opportunity enablement. So these are kind of, hand in hand. If we do something, does it reduce our risk? Or if we do it, does it give us future opportunity enablement? So the opportunity enablement, an example of that is that if we develop this API, it helps us deliver this current feature, but now we also have an API that we can leverage for future features. And so this would be rated higher on that opportunity enablement. Or if we do this, it reduces our risk, so therefore we have further risk reduction going forward in time. One of the things that you do is the way that work shortest job first kind of operates is you evaluate things against themselves at a point in time. So you typically do this once a quarter. You look at everything on your CSI register and say, okay, let's rate each one of these items against themselves on user business value. Which one of these things gives the business the most value? And you rate them against each other. Which one of these things has the most time criticality? Which one of these has the most risk reduction or opportunity enablement? So you rate them against each other so that you're determining which one of these gives us the most value out of what we can potentially do. Then we just simply look at, okay, what's the job size? And job size is what's the level of effort required to get this done. If you start out, just do number of days. Just estimate number of days. If you're a full, mature, agile shop or something like that, you might be able to use user points or story points, those types of things. But starting out, you can just do number of days. Is this going to be 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 120? How many days will it take us to get this done? From there, you just plug it in. So we do, the user business value plus time criticality plus the risk reduction opportunity enablement. You add all that together and divide it by the job size. And that tells you, okay, whichever one of these has the highest is going to be the one that brings us the most value the quickest. And so it gives you a way to mathematically sort of drive your prioritization. Let's say you do this and you go and meet with the business and they're like, wait, why are you doing this first? You now have some sort of mathematical way, some sort of way to go back and go, here's how we came to this decision. Maybe we misinterpreted, the value back to the business. Maybe we need to rate these slightly differently, but at least gives you some structure to be able to do this and make these decisions. Whereas if you don't, the business comes to you and says, hey, why'd you do this first? You're like, well, we thought it was good. We thought you'd like it, and so you kind of remove some of that subjectivity by giving you some formula to be able to determine these things. Just for the time of this webinar, I didn't go hugely in depth for this. If this is a topic that interests you, we do have another video on our YouTube channel, or you can feel free to reach out to me directly to kind of walk through exactly how to calculate this. The way I recommend using it is you include it as calculations with your CSI. So as you look at your CSI register, there's a column that gives you the work shortest job first, and it's one input into determining priority. It may not be the only input into determining priority, but it's at least one input into determining priority. So if this interests you, as we mentioned earlier, a lot of this content comes from ITIL, and so in the way their best practices around IT service management. So if you haven't already, please check out the ITIL Foundations course. That's a 3-day course. There's no prerequisites. It teaches you the big picture of ITIL. We do teach those, so feel free to check out our website for upcoming training dates. Check that out, and you'll probably have myself or Amanda as one of your instructors. So
yeah, we have classes every month, and just next month in June we have classes in Virginia and DC.
Yep. So we offer Virginia, DC, and also we come on site.
Yep.
So we also do Phoenix and San Diego as well, but we have bags. We will travel. So and then recommend taking the foundations class. So that gives you, big picture, just as it implies. It gives you a foundations within ITIL, within IT service management. Then if you find yourself doing a lot with continual service improvement, if you really like some of the things that we talked about today and you want to learn even more, I recommend taking the CSI intermediate class. That's where you do a deep dive into the CSI life cycle of, okay, exactly how do I do this? How do I manage it? You look at the 6-step model that we looked at today. You also look at the 7-step model. So there's a lot of tools and models that you look at, Cotter's rules of change. There's a lot of good tools there for managing organizational change. And if we think about continual service improvement, that's really what it boils down to, is making organizational change. We also have other resources. So we got a few blog articles out there on that. So, turning your strategy into action, creating your CSI register. We also have a CSI register template out there that you can download. It gives you a nice starting point. So if you're looking for somewhere to start, download that template. That gets you a good jumping off point. And as we mentioned a few times, I'll just reiterate, start where you're at. So if you only manage your team, then start with your team. If you happen to be the CIO, maybe you can start with everybody. And so you can, drive that strategic planning. You can create the organizational wide CSI register, but just start where you're at and what you're able to do. The big thing is start. Don't put it off. This is one of those that you can get started at whatever level you happen to be at. All right, that covers the slides that we had for today. So I'll turn it over to Lindsay to see if we've had any questions come up along the way.
Yeah, we do have one question around, I guess it's on the shorter term. How do you make time for CSI projects in the day-to-day, the important versus the urgent? I'm guessing that's being referenced there.
Yeah, that's a tough question. How do you make time for CSI is probably one of the biggest hurdles you'll have to overcome to start this process. And the answer is you just have to do it. You just have to, if you want to set some time on your calendar, that's a good tip that I would suggest if you're having trouble getting started. But if you don't start, you're never going to improve. And improvement tasks are always going to get pushed to the bottom of your to-do list every single day. So if you don't start, your to-do list is going to keep growing, and enabling CSI is going to help It's going to help to hopefully make your life easier in the future and shrink your to-do list. So my advice would be to schedule time for CSI, whether it's a couple times a week on your calendar and just short blocks to start.
Yep, I would echo that. There's nothing magical here. You just got to start doing it. And I know that you're like, oh, well, that's not earth shattering. Well, yeah, you just kind of have to put that time in there. Like Amanda said, block it out on your calendar right now. Before you leave this webinar, put a half-hour meeting for your own self for tomorrow for 30 minutes to get this started, to download the template and start creating it for your team.
You've already started. You're here.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, you got it. You got to a starting point. So, like I said, put a half-hour meeting on your calendar for tomorrow, download the template, and start populating it. And then, Amanda mentioned, I'll reference the other things, is start making it part of the regular things that you do. Make it an agenda item for your team meeting. So we talk about the CSI register each time. Have it at the bottom of each email. So kind of get it out there where it's visible. Again, don't buy the treadmill and then put it in the hardest spot in your house to get to, because you're never going to see it. You're never going to look at it. Spend some time, dedicate some, time to get it created, then make it front and center as you go forward through things. You can also, I would look for areas that you may already be doing some of these activities. So like if your change management process is fairly mature, you may already be doing post-implementation reviews. If so, capture those and kind of have those be your first CSI register. So kind of look at, maybe there may be areas that some of this work's already being done, and you can kind of piggyback off of it to kind of get some early wins.
Cool. So I should put my treadmill next to my refrigerator is the
Correct.
answer. Okay.
Correct.
Got it.
Even better in front. So if you had to move the treadmill to open the fridge.
Okay, we've got two questions here that I'm going to consolidate into one if you're up for the challenge. Part one.
Amanda's up for it totally.
Part one, in terms of having one register, is that for the organization as a whole, or is it for the department specifically? Sub-question, are there benefits to breaking down registers for smaller organizational units?
Yeah, so my recommendation, and sort of, I guess it even matches with ITIL, so it's even better, that's best practice, is you have one register so that we're not maintaining multiple lists, because if you do, then it gets really hard to kind of organize things. But as you get bigger, you may subdivide your list depending on team, department, process, so you'll have some way to categorize the items. So leadership and even all of IT can see big picture, everything that's happening, everything on the CSI register, but then to consume it on a more daily basis, you'll have some way to segment it. And so ones that we've helped create, ones I've implemented, sometimes we did it by process. So we're trying all these things for change, all these things for asset and configuration management. For some of the development teams that we've worked with, sometimes they break it down by team, that they'll have their sprint retro, and the items from that retro go on to the CSI register. And some of those things are team specific. The other thing that's nice is if you keep one list, you can start seeing, oh, wait, look, team A, team C, and D all kind of have this same improvement idea. Let's combine those together, because we'll get a lot of value from that. And if you maintain separate lists, you would never have that visibility.
You might even duplicate your efforts.
Yeah, that'd be worth duplicating, or even do them differently. So yeah.
Cool. That's all the questions I have.
Okay.
Great.
Excellent. Well, thank everyone for joining us today, and thank you for your time. If you have any questions about your CSI, the CSI register, getting started, any of the things that we mentioned today, please feel free to reach out to us. The best email address is that info@beyond20.com. Also, we have an active, social media presence. We do a lot of YouTube videos, so please check any of those out if we can be of any assistance to you.
Cool. Thanks, everyone. Have a fantastic Thursday.
All right. Thank you.